We all know Sumit's parents wanted him to have a life that fit neatly into their cultural expectations. We watched for years as they fought his relationship with Jenny, citing the age gap, the cultural differences, and most importantly, her inability to give them grandchildren. But in the end, we thought love won. We thought Sumit chose Jenny, definitively and finally. A shocking new report, however, allegedly from a family insider, suggests he didn't choose at all. Instead, he and his parents allegedly found a loophole, a dark and devastating compromise that involves a secret second family. And according to this theory, Jenny has no idea she's not his one and only. She's just the first wife. This is a story so twisted, so heartbreaking, it threatens to reframe everything we thought we knew about this iconic couple. If you want to dive deep into the conspiracies and the hidden truths of the 90-day universe, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and give this video a like. You are not going to want to miss a single detail of what we're about to uncover, because this goes far beyond simple reality TV drama. This is a conspiracy of the heart. To understand the sheer gravity of this alleged plot, we have to go back. We have to rewind through the years of turmoil and understand the foundational cracks in Sumit and Jenny's relationship, cracks that his family has allegedly exploited with surgical precision. Their story from the very beginning was built on a deception. Let's not forget, Jenny didn't fall in love with Sumit Singh, the call center employee from Delhi. She fell in love with Michael Jones, a handsome young man from Chicago, a complete fabrication Sumit created to lure her in. That initial catfishing is a crucial piece of this puzzle. It establishes a precedent. It shows us that Sumit, when caught between his desires and his reality, has the capacity to construct an entirely separate life, to lie not just with his words, but with his very identity. He lived as Michael Jones online for over a year, a full-time commitment to a lie. While many have forgiven this as a youthful indiscretion, a foolish mistake born of insecurity, this new theory suggests it was merely the first rehearsal for a much larger, more devastating performance. When Jenny finally flew to India and the truth came out, she was faced with a choice. Forgive the man who lied about his name, his location, and his entire life, or walk away. She chose to forgive. She chose to believe that the love was real, even if the persona was not. This was the first test of her trust, and she passed it, demonstrating a willingness to overlook a monumental deception in the name of love. This, according to the inside source, was a critical observation for Sumit's family. They saw a woman who could be placated, a woman whose love for their son made her willing to accept circumstances that many others would find intolerable. Then came the second and far more significant deception, Sumit's secret pre-existing arranged marriage. This wasn't just a lie online. This was a legally and culturally binding union that he hid from Jenny for years. He allowed her to move to India, to give up her life in America, to live with him under his parents' roof, all while he was another woman's husband. The confrontation was explosive. We all remember the scene. The screaming, the arrival of his wife's family, the utter humiliation and heartbreak for Jenny. Sumit was literally pulled away from her, forced back into his other life. That moment should have been the end. For any rational person, it would have been the ultimate betrayal, a clear sign that this man was living a double life and was incapable of being honest. But again, Jenny forgave. She waited for him, she endured the shame, the uncertainty, the pain of being the other woman, because she believed in his love. She believed his story that he was a victim, forced into a loveless marriage by his parents, and that she, Jenny, was his one true escape, his one true love. The narrative was powerful, a story of forbidden love, of a man fighting against his family and his culture for the woman of his dreams. But what if that narrative was another, more sophisticated lie? What if his family's outrage wasn't just about his affair with an older American woman, but about the clumsy and public way he was handling his duties? The divorce was long, expensive, and messy. Sumit's parents, Anil and Sana, were positioned as the primary antagonists. Their tearful pleas, their angry threats, their absolute refusal to accept Jenny, it all seemed to stem from their disapproval of the relationship. They cried about their honor, their standing in the community, and their dream of grandchildren. We, the audience, saw them as the villains, the unyielding traditionalists, standing in the way of true love. And Sumit played the part of the tortured hero perfectly. He was the man caught in the middle, torn between the woman he loved and the family he was bound to by duty. He spoke of his depression, his fear, his desperation. He sold a story of a man on the brink, willing to sacrifice everything for Jenny. And eventually, he did. or so we thought. After years of fighting, after a dramatic scene where his mother threatened to disown him, they finally married in a simple temple ceremony. It was a moment of triumph. It felt like the conclusion of a decade-long saga. Sumit had finally chosen. He had defied his parents and chosen Jenny. His family eventually, begrudgingly, began to accept the marriage, or at least tolerate it. The tension seemed to cool. They began attending family functions together. It looked like a fragile peace had been brokered. But the one unsolvable problem always remained, lurking beneath the surface of their domestic bliss, the issue of children. It was the one demand from his parents that Sumit could never meet with Jenny. On the show, we saw them discuss it. They talked about adoption, but Sumit was lukewarm. Jenny was past childbearing age. It was a biological and logistical dead end. In one of the most telling conversations, Sumit's mother, Sana, looked at him with tears in her eyes and said, "You are my only son." The unspoken words hung heavy in the air. You are my only chance for a legacy, for a grandchild to carry on the Singh name. This is where the real story, the one we all watched, ends and where this new terrifying theory begins. According to the Family Insider, the parents' eventual acceptance of the marriage was not a surrender. It was a strategic retreat. They realized that direct opposition was not working. Sumit, when pushed into a corner, would choose Jenny out of defiance. So, they changed their tactics. They stopped fighting the marriage and instead began to work around it. They allegedly devised a long-term plan, a horrifyingly pragmatic and cruel solution to what they saw as the Jenny problem. The plan was rooted in a dark, almost feudal logic. They would allow Sumit to have his love marriage with Jenny. They would let him honor the public commitment he had made to her. She would keep the title of wife. She would be his companion, but she would be, in essence, a ceremonial wife. Her role would be temporary. The real duty of a wife in their eyes, to produce an heir, would be fulfilled by someone else. They decided that Sumit needed a second wife. Now, in modern India, polygamy is illegal for Hindus. A man cannot legally have two wives. But the key here is the difference between a legal, state-sanctioned marriage and a traditional religious one. The family's plan, allegedly, was not to have Sumit legally marry a second woman while married to Jenny. It was to have him enter into a discreet, traditional union, a marriage in the eyes of the gods and their specific community, but one that would remain off the books, legally speaking. This new wife's purpose would be singular, to bear Sumit's children. The plan was presented to Sumit not as a betrayal, but as a compromise, a duty. The insider claims his parents sat him down and laid it all out. They would frame it as a way for him to have everything he wanted. "You love Jenny," they would have said. "We understand that. We will not ask you to leave her. You can continue your life with her, but you also have a duty to your ancestors, to your bloodline. This family name cannot end with you. It is your dharma, your sacred responsibility to produce an heir." They painted a picture of a practical, compartmentalized life. Jenny would be the wife of his heart, the woman he lived with day to day. The second wife would be the wife of his duty, the mother of his children. She would live separately, perhaps in a nearby town or even a different part of the city, supported by the family. Sumit would divide his time. The arrangement would be a closely guarded secret, known only to the inner circle of the family. They would have assured him, "Jenny never has to know. We will protect her. We will ensure she is comfortable and cared for. You are not replacing her. You are simply fulfilling an obligation that she cannot." Think about the psychological pressure on Sumit. This is a man who has spent his entire life trying to please his parents, a man steeped in a culture where familial duty often outweighs personal desire. He has already shown a capacity for living a double life. They were offering him a supposed way out of his impossible situation, a way to stop the fighting, a way to have his parents' approval and keep Jenny. It was a devil's bargain, presented as a perfect, logical solution. He could be a loving husband and a dutiful son. He just had to live two separate lives. And so, the deception began. The first phase of the plan was to find the right woman. This couldn't be just anyone. She had to be from their community, from a family who understood the delicate and secret nature of the arrangement. She had to be young, healthy, and capable of bearing children. And crucially, she had to be someone whose own circumstances would make her amenable to such an unorthodox proposal. They found, according to the source, the perfect candidate, a young widow. A widow in some traditional Indian communities can face a difficult future. She might be seen as inauspicious or have limited prospects for a prestigious remarriage. By choosing a widow, the Singh family was not only finding a bride, but also, in their eyes, offering a woman a position of honor and security she might not find elsewhere. She would be the mother of the Singh heir. Her child would be raised with wealth and status. It was a transactional arrangement, cloaked in the language of tradition and mutual benefit. Her family, in turn, would gain a powerful connection to the Singhs. Everyone gets something, and the only person who loses is the one who doesn't even know she's in the game, Jenny. With the candidate identified, the second phase began, the courtship. This had to be done under the deepest cover. Sumit started telling Jenny he needed to attend more family events alone. "It's a religious ceremony, a puja for the men in the family," he might say, or, "It's the wedding of a distant cousin from my father's village. It's very traditional, you would be bored. It's men's business." Jenny, wanting to be a respectful and understanding wife, would have accepted these explanations. She had already experienced being excluded from certain family rituals due to cultural differences. Sumit's excuses were plausible. She trusted him. He had, after all, given up everything for her. Or so she believed. These trips were, of course, a complete fabrication. They were carefully orchestrated meetings between Sumit and the family of the prospective second wife. They were chaperoned visits, formal introductions, and negotiations, all disguised as religious pilgrimages and family obligations. During this period, the insider alleges that Sumit's behavior began to change in subtle ways. He became more guarded with his phone. He would take calls in another room, speaking in hushed Hindi. There were unexplained expenses, small at first, then larger. Gifts for a family he claimed were distant relatives, money transferred for ceremonial costs. When Jenny would ask, he would have a ready-made excuse, always tied to a complex family obligation she couldn't possibly understand. He was building the infrastructure of his second life, brick by brick, right under her nose. He was likely coached by his parents on how to handle it. They would have told him to be affectionate with Jenny, to reassure her constantly, to make her feel secure. The success of the plan depended on Jenny remaining blissfully unaware. She was not just a wife, she was now a liability, a potential obstacle to the family's lineage. Her happiness was paramount, but only insofar as it ensured her passivity and her silence. They were, in effect, managing her. The plan was monstrously long-term. The idea wasn't just to have a child and then reveal the secret. The plan was to maintain the dual lives indefinitely. The second wife would have the child, perhaps even a second. The children would be raised, at least initially, away from Jenny's view. They would be introduced to the world as, perhaps, the children of a close relative, whom Sumit was generously supporting. The lies would compound, becoming more and more elaborate over time. And what was the endgame for Jenny? This is the most chilling part of the entire alleged plot. The family's plan was to simply wait. Jenny is 30 years older than Sumit. They were counting on time and biology. They would keep Jenny financially comfortable, give her a life of relative ease, keep her happy in her bubble. But they would be isolating her, keeping her at arm's length from the true heart of the family, which would now be centered around the new wife and the heir. They were essentially waiting for her to grow old and pass away. Upon her death, the plan would enter its final phase. The secret wife would be brought out of the shadows. She would be quietly but officially integrated into the family as Sumit's one true wife. The children would take their rightful place as his heirs. To the outside world, it would look like a widower finally finding happiness again after the tragic loss of his first, beloved wife. Sumit's story would be one of enduring love and ultimate duty. He had honored his commitment to the foreign woman he loved until her dying day, and only then did he fulfill his duty to his family by marrying a proper Indian woman and raising a family. It was a perfect, seamless narrative. Jenny's entire existence, her decades-long love story, would be reduced to a placeholder, a temporary chapter before the real story of the Singh dynasty could continue. She wasn't the love of his life. She was a midlife diversion he was honor-bound to see through to the end. This horrifying strategy explains the parents' sudden shift from open hostility to quiet tolerance. They weren't accepting Jenny, they were reclassifying her. She was no longer a threat to their bloodline, but a temporary complication that could be managed and eventually outlived. The whole family, according to the source, was in on it. Aunts, uncles, cousins. A conspiracy of silence, all dedicated to the singular goal of producing an heir. For months, this alleged plan proceeded without a hitch. Sumit grew more confident in his lies, more adept at managing his two worlds. Jenny, meanwhile, settled into her life as Mrs. Singh, likely attributing any odd behavior from Sumit to the ongoing stress of their unique situation and the pressures of his family. She had fought for so long to be with him that now, in a period of relative peace, she was likely unwilling to see the signs of a new, more insidious war being waged against her. But deception, especially on this scale, is difficult to maintain. It requires constant vigilance, and eventually, people make mistakes. And Sumit, a man who has proven to be a clumsy liar in the past, was about to make a very big one. The first crack in this perfect, horrifying plan was about to appear, and it would come during a simple video call. Jenny was at home in their apartment in India, and Sumit was away on one of his now frequent trips, supposedly attending a religious ceremony for a male relative several hours away. It was an overnight trip. Jenny, likely feeling a bit lonely, decided to video call him just to see his face and say goodnight. When Sumit answered, he seemed flustered, off balance. The connection was poor, and the lighting was strange. He was in a room that was ornately decorated, far more so than a simple guest room. There were flowers and the sound of muted chatter and music in the background, like a party or a formal gathering was happening nearby. "Where are you? It's so loud," Jenny asked, her voice tinged with confusion. "Nowhere. It is nothing," Sumit said quickly, trying to move the camera so it only showed his face against a blank wall. "It is just the family. They are celebrating. It is a long ceremony." His answers were vague, his eyes darting around nervously, not looking at the camera, but at something or someone in the room with him. Jenny felt a prickle of suspicion. It didn't feel right. And then for a split second, as Sumit shifted his position, the camera's view widened. In the background, Jenny saw a woman. She was young, beautiful, and dressed in a stunningly formal sari, adorned with jewelry. She couldn't have been more than 25. And in that brief, flickering moment, Jenny watched as this woman reached forward with a deliberate, graceful movement and applied a dot of red powder, a bindi, to the center of Sumit's forehead. The gesture was intimate, respectful, and deeply symbolic. It was not the casual gesture of an aunt or a cousin. It was the kind of gesture of reverence and blessing often shown by a woman to her husband, or by a prospective mother-in-law to her future son-in-law during a formal ceremony. It was a gesture of belonging. "Sumit, who was that? Who just did that?" Jenny asked, her heart beginning to pound in her chest. Panic flashed across Sumit's face. Pure, unadulterated terror. He fumbled with the phone. That was no one. It was just an aunt. An auntie, you know," he stammered, his voice an octave higher than usual. "She is just being respectful. It is a tradition." "An aunt? She looks so young. What's going on, Sumit? Where are you, really?" But Sumit couldn't handle the questions. He couldn't think fast enough to build a convincing lie. So he did what he always does when cornered. He fled. "Jenny, the connection is bad. I cannot hear you. I will call you back later. I have to go. I love you." And before she could say another word, he ended the call. Jenny was left staring at a black screen. The image of that young woman's hand on her husband's forehead burned into her mind. An aunt. The excuse felt so flimsy, so pathetic. His panic was the real tell. It wasn't the reaction of a man caught in a noisy room. It was the reaction of a man whose two separate worlds had just collided. The red flag was no longer just a feeling of unease. It was a specific person, a specific gesture, a specific lie. Jenny didn't know what was going on, but she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that Sumit was lying to her about something far more serious than a family party. That brief video call had planted a seed of doubt, and that seed was about to grow into a terrifying realization as she would soon stumble upon the smoking gun, a physical document that would lay the entire monstrous plan bare. She thought she had fought the final battle for their love, but she was about to discover the war had only just begun, and she was its intended casualty. The lies were starting to unravel, and the truth was going to be more devastating than anything she could have possibly imagined. The silence after the call was deafening. Jenny sat in the quiet of their apartment, the glow of her phone screen illuminating the profound confusion on her face. An aunt. The word echoed in her mind, hollow and false. She replayed the brief, grainy image over and over. The young woman's serene face, the elegance of her sari, the deliberate, practiced grace of her hand as she marked Sumit's forehead. It wasn't the clumsy, affectionate gesture of a relative. It was a ritual. It was significant. And Sumit's reaction, the wide-eyed, cornered animal panic, was the most damning evidence of all. He wasn't just hiding a party. He was hiding a person. For the next 2 days, while Sumit was away, Jenny lived in a state of suspended anxiety. She tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a cultural thing she truly didn't understand. Maybe the woman was a priestess of some kind. Maybe Sumit panicked because he knew Jenny would be insecure, that she would misinterpret it. She tried to convince herself that her own fears were the real problem, that years of fighting for their love had made her paranoid. She wanted to believe him. The alternative, the idea that after everything they had been through, he would lie to her about another woman, was too catastrophic to contemplate. It would mean that their peace was a fiction, their marriage a house of cards. When Sumit returned, he was the perfect, loving husband. He came in bearing a small box of her favorite sweets and a beautiful printed scarf. A gift, he said, from the auntie she had seen. The audacity of it was breathtaking. He wrapped the scarf around her neck, kissing her forehead. "I missed you so much," he said, his voice thick with an affection that now felt theatrical. "Was a very boring family thing. You would have hated it." He was trying to normalize it, to gaslight her into believing her own eyes had deceived her. Jenny, wanting to avoid a fight, wanting to believe the beautiful lie, played along. "It looked like a fancy party," she said, trying to keep her tone light. Sumit laughed, a little too loudly. "Oh, you know my family. Everything is a big drama, a big show. That woman you saw, my cousin's wife's sister, is very dramatic. She treats me like a movie star." He was building a new layer of deception, adding details to make it feel real. He was good at this. She had to remember, he had always been good at this. Life returned to a semblance of normal, but for Jenny, a shadow had fallen. The trust which she had so painstakingly rebuilt after his secret first marriage was fractured again. She found herself watching him more closely. She noticed when he would step outside to take a call, when he would quickly close a messaging app on his phone if she walked into the room. There was a distance in his eyes sometimes, a distractedness that hadn't been there before. He was physically present with her, but she had the unnerving feeling that a part of his mind was somewhere else entirely, tending to a life she knew nothing about. Weeks went by, and the season of festivals began. It was a time of year Jenny loved, a time of lights and family and food. Diwali, the biggest of them all, was approaching. Sumit announced that his parents were insisting they come to the family home for the main celebration. This was a huge step. While they had reached a truce, Jenny still often felt like an outsider in his family's home. An invitation for the most important family holiday of the year felt like a genuine olive branch. A part of her, the part that so desperately wanted everything to be okay, saw this as a sign that they were finally, truly being accepted. The evening of Diwali, the Singh family home was ablaze with light. Clay lamps, or diyas, flickered on every windowsill and balcony. Strings of fairy lights were draped over the doorway. The air was thick with the smell of incense, ghee, and the faint sulfurous scent of firecrackers exploding in the street. Inside, the house was crowded with relatives. Aunts, uncles, and cousins milled about, dressed in their finest silks and brocades. Sumit's mother, Sana, greeted Jenny with a smile that was polite, but did not quite reach her eyes. "Jenny, so happy you could come," she said, her voice smooth. There was something different about her demeanor. The old, overt hostility was gone, replaced by a kind of serene, almost pitying condescension. It was as if she were looking at a guest, a temporary visitor, not her son's wife. At the time, Jenny dismissed it as her own insecurity. In hindsight, she would see it as the quiet confidence of someone whose long-term plan was proceeding exactly as scheduled. Sumit was immediately swept up by his male relatives, pulled into conversations in rapid-fire Hindi that Jenny couldn't follow. She was left to navigate the sea of female relatives alone. She smiled, she accepted sweets, she complimented saris, but she felt utterly and completely alone, an exotic ornament in a world she would never fully belong to. After an hour of making strained small talk, she needed to escape for a moment. She excused herself to find the bathroom. The main floor bathroom was occupied, so she remembered there was another one on the second floor, near the bedrooms. She made her way up the stairs, the sounds of the party fading below. The upstairs hallway was dark and quiet. She found the bathroom, but as she was about to go back downstairs, she noticed a door slightly ajar at the end of the hall. It led to a room that was clearly used for storage. It was dimly lit, filled with old furniture covered in white sheets, stacked trunks, and cardboard boxes. She doesn't know why she did it. Maybe it was the lingering suspicion from the video call. Maybe it was the feeling of isolation at the party. It was a simple, idle curiosity. a desire to peek into the hidden corners of the family she had fought so hard to join. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The air was musty, filled with the scent of camphor and dust. She navigated around a stack of old mattresses and saw a large, ornate wooden box tucked away in a corner. It looked newer than the other items in the room. It wasn't covered in dust. Her heart gave a little thump. She knelt down and lifted the heavy lid. Inside, nestled in layers of tissue paper, was a magnificent set of ceremonial wedding clothes. There was a heavy, deep red lehenga, a bridal skirt and blouse, intricately embroidered with gold thread and tiny mirrors. It was exquisite and clearly very expensive. Alongside it was a matching sherwani, a groom's formal coat. This was a complete wedding ensemble. And it was not hers. Her own wedding ceremony with Sumit had been simple. She had worn a beautiful but modest sari. This was something else entirely. This was for a grand, traditional, planned wedding. Her first thought was that perhaps it belonged to a cousin who was getting married soon. But why would it be hidden here, in a dusty storage room? As she lifted the heavy skirt to admire the craftsmanship, a thick manila folder that had been tucked underneath it slid out and fell to the floor. Its contents spilled out, a sheaf of papers held together by a clip. Jenny's hands were trembling as she picked them up. The top page was a glossy, professionally printed document. At the top, in an elegant script, were the words, "Matrimonial Biodata." It was a formal matchmaking profile. Her blood ran cold as she saw the name printed below, Sumit Singh. It was a profile for her husband. She read on, her breath catching in her throat. It listed his age, his height, his education, his profession, and his caste. It detailed his family's respectable background and financial stability. It was a document designed to present him as a prime candidate for marriage. And then she saw the section for marital status. Her mind reeled. What could it possibly say? Divorced? It didn't. Instead, there were two words that made no sense and yet explained everything. Complicated, awaiting resolution. It was a carefully chosen, ambiguous phrase that concealed a world of deceit. It was a placeholder, a status that said, he's taken for now, but not for long. Shaking, she flipped to the next page. It was a profile of the prospective bride. It described a 26-year-old woman, a widow, from a good family in their community, educated, homely. I am eager to start a new family. And stapled to the corner of the page was a photograph. Jenny let out a small, strangled gasp. It was her, the woman from the video call, the aunt. Staring back at her from the page was the same beautiful, serene face, professionally photographed, looking every bit the perfect Indian bride. The final page of the document was the most damning of all. It wasn't a profile, it was a summary, a kind of proposal or agreement. It used discreet, formal language, but its meaning was brutally clear. It outlined a plan for a discreet, traditional union. It spoke of the paramount importance of continuing the family line and the need to produce legitimate heirs for the Singh family. It mentioned that the groom's current personal commitments would be honored and maintained separately, without disruption, for the foreseeable future. It was a business contract for a secret second marriage, a plot to create a second family, all laid out in black and white. Jenny sank to the dusty floor, the papers clutched in her hand. The room seemed to spin. Every lie, every excuse, every moment of doubt from the past few months clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The men's business, the family ceremonies, the nervous phone calls, the young woman applied the bindi. It wasn't a random flirtation. It wasn't a simple affair. It was this, a calculated, cold-blooded, family-sanctioned plan to replace her. The phrase awaiting resolution burned in her mind. She was the complication. Her life, her marriage, her love was the problem that was awaiting resolution. The resolution she now understood with chilling certainty was her own eventual death. They were not just betraying her, they were waiting for her to die. The politeness from Sumit's mother downstairs was not acceptance. It was the patience of a predator that knows its prey has a limited lifespan. She stayed in that room for what felt like an eternity, the sounds of the happy celebration downstairs mocking her silent agony. Her entire world had been rewritten. The great love story she had sacrificed everything for, her home, her family, her financial security, was a lie. She wasn't the cherished wife who had won against all odds. She was a placeholder, a ceremonial figurehead in Sumit's life, while the real wife, the one who would fulfill the duties that mattered to his family, was waiting in the wings. Eventually, numb with shock and a cold rising fury, She gathered the papers. She folded them carefully and tucked them into her purse. She walked out of the storage room, closing the door softly behind her, a ghost at a party celebrating her own obsolescence. She went downstairs, her face a pale, emotionless mask. She found Sumit, who was laughing with his cousins. He saw her and his smile faltered slightly, sensing the change in her. "Jenny, are you okay? You look pale." "I have a headache," she said, her voice flat, devoid of all emotion. "I want to go home." The ride home was silent. Sumit tried to make small talk, but her monosyllabic answers eventually silenced him. He likely assumed she was just upset about feeling excluded at the party, a familiar argument. He had no idea what was coming. They walked into their apartment. The lights were still on from when they left. It looked the same, but it was a crime scene now. The scene of a decade-long deception. Jenny walked to the center of the living room, turned to face him, and opened her purse. She pulled out the folded biodata. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She simply held it out to him. Sumit looked at the papers in her hand. Recognition dawned on his face, followed by the same look of sheer terror she had seen on the video call, magnified 100 times. The color drained from his face. He looked from the papers to her eyes and saw not anger, but a profound, soul-deep emptiness. "What is this, Sumit?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He just stared at the document, the physical proof of his ultimate betrayal. He couldn't lie his way out of this. There was no auntie to blame, no plausible excuse to invent. The evidence was absolute. He sank to his knees, not in a dramatic plea, but in a complete collapse, as if the strings holding him upright had been cut. And then came the confession. It tumbled out of him, a torrent of pathetic excuses, self-pity, and twisted logic. He sobbed, telling her that his parents had cornered him, that the pressure to have a child was destroying him. He claimed he did it to protect her. "I didn't want to lose you, Jenny," he cried, tears streaming down his face. "They told me they would never stop fighting us. They said they would make our lives miserable forever unless I gave them a grandson. This was the only way to make them stop, to let us have peace." He confessed the entire plot: the search for the widow, the secret courtship disguised as family trips, the plan for a quiet, traditional wedding, the intention to set up the second wife and their future child in a separate home to support them in secret. He tried to frame it as a sacrifice he was making, a double life he was willing to lead so that he could keep both his family and her. He painted himself as the victim, the man trapped between love and duty. Jenny listened, her expression unchanging. The more he talked, the clearer the horror became. He was trying to have both. He wasn't choosing between her and his family. He was choosing himself, his own desire to avoid conflict, his own inability to be a man and stand up for his choices. And then he said the words that sealed his fate, the words that revealed the true depth of the cruelty. "It wouldn't have changed anything for us," he pleaded, grabbing her hand, which she pulled away. "You would still be my wife, my love. She would just be for the family. We would just wait. In time, after you were gone, then she would become official. It was a way to give them what they wanted without ever having to leave you." There it was, the end game, spoken aloud. He wasn't just cheating on her, he was building her replacement and putting her on layaway. The betrayal was so profound, so complete, it was almost sublime in its monstrosity. It wasn't an affair, a moment of weakness. It was a calculated, long-term business plan for her life and death. Her role in his life was not just temporary, but her very mortality was a key component of his family's succession plan. She was the first wife, the starter wife, the one whose love and sacrifice had paved the way for the real wife to eventually take her place. The love story was a lie. The fight was a lie. Sumit hadn't chosen her. He had simply installed her in the first of a two-wife system, a system designed to discard her when she was no longer needed. Is this a twisted cultural compromise? A desperate man's attempt to navigate an impossible situation where family duty collides with modern love? Or is this the most heartless, sociopathic betrayal imaginable, a cold and calculated plot to use one woman's love as a placeholder until she conveniently dies? Let me know what you think in the comments. Is there any justification, any at all, for what he did? Can love ever survive a betrayal this deep?